Yo, guys, what is up? And welcome back to another episode of the Game 6 Clay podcast. It's your boy Gautam, my boys Chuck and Matt. Brothers, how we doing? Welcome back. Road trip complete.
Oof. It was yeah, no, awful poetic that I get to fly in last night, make my homecoming as soon as the Warriors make theirs.
There you go. Holiday season come back after some rough time on the road again.
Brutal times, man. I didn't have a very good journey getting back here, but I think the Warriors definitely had a worse trip than I did.
Rough plane ride back. Matt, how we doing, man? I know this road trip couldn't have been good for you.
Dude, no, I was gonna say no complaints, but I actually have like at least four complaints.
A
Uh,
lot, at least four.
yeah, there are some complaints. No, I mean it's been tough, man. Steph going down and then losing by a combined 3,000 over the course of three games is not it's not ideal, dude. So here we are to break it down, and I'm having a rough one. It's okay though.
Here we are breaking down indeed, and you guys kind of summed that up, man. Steph went down, and then everything kind of just went south from that road trip. But the last time we spoke, the Warriors was a 1-1 on that trip. Obviously Steph went down, going into a rough stretch of Philly, Toronto, and then the two New York teams, the Knicks and the Nets, to close it out. And they went 1-5 on the road trip collectively, picking up a win in Toronto, but. Just a lot of, again, just not enough healthy bodies. You got the young guys playing a lot of minutes down the stretch and there in the last two games. And I felt like, for me personally watching the game, I think that the Indy loss, the Philly loss and the Toronto game were really good, like bright spots for the team. I think that despite the losses, they didn't finish the job in Philly or no, what was the other one?
Indiana.
Philly and Indiana, correct? But they showed like they could compete and they got the job done in Toronto. So going into that Knicks game was a little tough to see that performance, and obviously the Brooklyn one was a wash from the start. But just want to get you guys' takes just on this last road trip, the losses, the win. The Warriors are going into an 8-game homestand now, sitting 3 games under 500, cozy in that 11th spot. Just what are your thoughts on just that trip and where we're at right now?
Yeah, so the thing that I think sort of bothered me, especially coming off the last two games, is we've beaten the horse to death about the young guys being put in a position to fail, really. We all know how that goes, but so many people have been saying, "Oh, well, the kids don't want to compete, they don't want to do this, they don't have any fight, whatever." That game in Philly, it happened. Like we saw Jordan Poole playing really well. We saw Dante DiVincenzo stepping it up, playing really well also. We saw Kevon Looney like overstepping his role and nearly dropping a goddamn triple double on them. Like they got contributions. They were able to get like Ty Jerome was able to give them some stuff. Jonathan Kuminga gave them some stuff. They played cohesive team defense, had one of their best defensive performances as a team in quite some time. Like excluding that Boston game, it was really like their best defensive performance of the month, in my opinion. And they did it without Andrew Wiggins. So, you know, they've done some really encouraging stuff. And, obviously getting your teeth kicked in by like 70 points combined against both the New York teams sucks. But people need to also remember like who these teams are and where they are in the season. Like both New York and Brooklyn are scorching hot right now. Like these are two teams that have been playing very good basketball. I think Brooklyn was like 18-7 since Jacques Vaughn took over, and the Knicks have put together a pretty solid winning streak. I want to check just to be sure, but yeah, coming into that game against
Eight
Golden
games.
State, they had seven in a row coming into that game, and they're playing against a team that doesn't have their two best players. Like,
Yeah, what'd you expect?
what do you think's going to happen? um, so yeah, it sucks to be 3 games below 500 at the end of the road trip. 1-5 sucks, but like you lost your MVP candidate. There aren't many teams that no team that leans on Steph Curry the way that the Warriors have for the last decade succeeds after their best player goes down. Like that's just not how it works. So I completely understand the frustration, but the difference between like getting beat by like 40 and maybe scratching a couple games around once in a while is really not that big when you've lost your star player. So I think people are reading a little too much into these last couple results.
Yeah, it's just tough. Like the Philly game was like the best case scenario for how a game can go without Steph in a lot of ways, right? And that's when you're down Wiggins as it is. You're down Steph, obviously, and then listen, when you are playing the Knicks and the Nets, like you said, Chuck, who are as hot as they are, you're down four of your best seven guys, basically. Four of your best eight guys. And that's what they were. I mean, Michael Green is unfortunately one of their best eight or nine guys, right? He's out. DiVincenzo probably had his best stretch of 4 or 5 games, right? He's out. Wiggins, like you said, probably the Warriors' second best player. He's out. Steph, out. If you Gotham, not a shot at you at all, man. But if you went into those games really thinking in your heart of hearts the Warriors were supposed to win, you know, you're gonna be disappointed, right? And Gotham, you don't seem disappointed in me, man. So I don't feel too bad
Not
about
at
it.
all.
But you know, it's just not. They're not gonna win those games when half the rotations out of the game, right? Not playing. So
just to add a little more to that, Brooklyn has won 10 of their last 11, and the only loss is to Boston. So again, what the hell are you gonna do?
Yeah, and like
Brooklyn's looking great. Brooklyn's looking great. New York's looking great. You lost some good teams. The problem with this, in my mind, though, is, and again, it's not a problem with being surprised by a loss. I'm not surprised by the losses. I was rooting for the Nets to score 200 yesterday. It was my goal. I was just hoping to see it happen. I'd never seen it before. No one has. Come on, give me 200 points. But listen, most of the teams in the league are closer to being the Knicks right now than they are the Pistons or the Hornets. And so my thought is just, even when, DiVincenzo gets back, Wiggins gets back, eventually Steph gets back, there just aren't a lot of easy wins to go around right now. And that's going to be a big plot line going forward in the season. Obviously, right now, it's just the roster is what it is. The injuries are what they are. The sickness is what it is. But that Knicks game to me especially was just like, oh shit, this is how every game almost is going to be a bloodbath because the league is 20 teams deep right now. So it just it gives me a heads up what coming the rest of the season.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with that, and I think that this road trip, like, just obviously went 1-5, but like you said, Chuck, earlier, like, you're not going to win without your best player, especially with how much the Warriors depend on Steph. And what you're looking for in these wins and losses are, can you find a replicable formula to, give yourself a chance? Like you said, Matt, like, you're going to play against teams like the Knicks, the Hornets, the Pistons. I mean, they beat the Warriors earlier in the season, so it's not like any of these next, whatever 8-game home stretch. It's not a shoo-in that you're going to win just because you're at home. But you're getting Wiggins back. Hopefully Dante and JaMychal Green are back as well. So you get a team with Jordan Poole, Klay Thompson, Draymond, Loon, Wiggins, DiVincenzo, and JaMychal Green. Like, you have at least some vets that you've seen a little bit. That Philly game, like you said, Chuck, I think they competed great on the defensive end. I think that Toronto game was great as well, just to see that against a struggling Toronto team as well, in their own right. But a good young team that was playing at home, looking to right the ship, and the Warriors were able to take that and come out of there with dub for the only win in the road trip. But it looked like a homestand obviously needed. I think they get their teeth kicked in by Memphis, but after that, like, you have some winnable games in that stretch. And I know we're going to get into it later in this episode, but it just seemed like they missed some chances to maybe capitalize on some wins in Philly and in Indy. But even so, like you guys said, the Knicks game, I think, was the most disappointing, just because you're coming off the Raptors win. But you didn't have DiVincenzo, you didn't have JaMychal Green. Again, a lot of onus on the youth, that they're still going through the struggling pains, man. Like, it's something that we knew coming into the season. I didn't think we'd think it was this bad, in terms of how far along maybe Wiseman was in his development, Moody being in the rotation, but Kuminga just figuring stuff out as an NBA player, and has been doing pretty well. And when there's a lot more vets around him, so you concede those games as losses. So I think, yeah, people are reading a lot into it, but I think a lot of it is because you're seeing what could be with this youth movement now, and what the deadline's coming up. Like, it's Judgment Day soon. Like, you're gonna have to make a pivot about what you want to do with this team, and these young guys, because if you really do want to win a championship, and go all in, you might have to start reconsidering where you're at with some of these projects that you've invested a couple seasons in now. So I
Man,
think that that's the biggest issue for the Warriors going in, because realistically, they're only 3 games under 500 at the 11th seed, where they're 3 games behind the 4th seed, I think. So like let's remember the big picture. It's an 82-game season. We're getting Steph back at some point, in January. So you really just got to survive this 8-game homestand. You got 22 days at home and some winnable games to get you, back at that 500 level when Steph gets around. So yeah, did it suck to go 1-5? Absolutely. Is there time to panic? No. And is it because is there anything going that they played well? Like you saw spurts. You're at home now, so can you put it together? I think that they got a few wins in them. So sucks to be 3 games under 500, but I think it's because of the larger issue. I think it's because you're starting to see the Kuminga kind of growing into his piece. Wiseman, it is what it is. PBJ, Moody, Bronze, still you haven't seen too much, but you're seeing guys kind of what they can do. But now you got to really reassess that 2 timeline plan, and maybe it falls on the front office, man. This for me it's on them to really figure this out.
So did you guys see anything that you loved? So Chuck, you had a really good thread I wanted to shout out real quick. It was on Kuminga. I don't know. I only saw the 2 posts on it. But it's been a rough week, obviously. But did you guys see anything you like a lot? I mean, Kuminga for me is just something that I'm overall just enjoying. Chuck, you had that again, back to your thread. I think you said he got to the rim 8 or 9 times against Brooklyn. Couldn't finish, right? Couldn't finish anything. But the fact that he's getting there is kind of the big thing, right? He's going to the rack, and that's something that just the ability to get there on his own. We know he can draw fouls. We know he can finish, especially with his left hand, which at this point in his career is just huge. That's one bright takeaway for me, because I think that's a weapon, that's a skill they need right now. Just anybody can get to the basket, and I think that will kind of open up a lot more once Steph is back, once Dante is back. Before we go on to just finger pointing, which I'm all for right now. I'm good for a good blame game when we have the chance. Anything that you saw in the last 2 weeks, that leaves you with some optimism?
I think Kuminga has definitely been a major factor to that. I think like you said, he's made a lot of strides, and even if you don't see the results there, I think the thing that I circle back to with Kuminga so often is how quickly he learns. I mean, the guy was just not an offensive player last year. Like he was dropping everything. He was kicking all his drives off his knees, like couldn't decide when to hit a shot or when to drive. Now he's making those decisions. He's keeping his dribble together, and he's actually getting to the rim. So to me, like with him, you can look at that in a vacuum and say, well, plenty of guys can get to the rim and, make an average amount of shots, which is what Kuminga's doing right now. But how many of those guys could literally do none of those things last year? Like that's the point I'm trying to make, is how quickly he's developed this skill. And, Jordan Poole may not be a very popular guy right now, but he made one of the most ridiculous year-over-year developmental leaps I've ever seen. He went from being maybe the worst player in the league his rookie season to like a legitimate second, third scoring option on a championship team 2 years later. So when you look back at where Kuminga was a year ago and you try to look ahead to where he could be a year from now, that's the kind of thing that really gets me excited about him offensively, because we know he can bring the defense. He's been a little better as like a help side guy. So I'm definitely feeling really encouraged about that. Another guy to shout out too, man, PBJ. Like he was letting it sing last night. He's looking like an ice cold shooter, looking more like his high school days, where he could just get everything. Like he gets every shot. It's impossible to contest him.
He's 6'9", like
6'10", 6'9"-ish.
It's crazy.
I mean, either way, the dude's got such a wingspan. Like you can't contest his shots. Like every shot is more or less uncontested, unless it's Kevin Durant, trying to match him up. Like Jaren Jackson,
very Michael Porter Jr.-esque kind of guy. Like,
yeah, that's tough because MPJ is such a like ridiculous outlier of a like movement shooter. Like he's probably the best on the move shooter not named Steph Curry in the league right now. And granted, that's quite the gap between 1 and 2, but I like PBJ is showing some things where he everything falls down from the shot, obviously. And if he's taking this really high rate of attempts and he's hitting close to 40% of them, he's at 42 right now. Obviously, a pretty small sample, but he's looked good in the G League too, shooting it. So it all falls down from there. But he's shown some decent stuff attacking closeouts. He's shown he can keep the ball moving, but also leverage his shooting into like getting downhill, getting some chances, making plays for others. So he just is starting to look like a really capable role guy, hopefully next year. And he's got some things to work on defensively, but he definitely offers like some, I like to call it like event defensive playmaking where you don't do a lot of things consistently play to play that are really good, but you have that knack for like getting your hand in the passing lane or like making a really good rotation and like creating those huge defensive plays that help to outweigh like the little mistakes you make on the other possessions. So that's I think that's been my takeaway too, is if he ends up being a guy that they have to ship out at the deadline because they're looking for upgrades, sucks. But if he doesn't, and he's able to stick around, like I'm really excited for what he's able to bring to the table going forward.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've always felt like PBJ just as the way, just the shooter, the just shooting ability he has. Like, I feel like he could fit in like right now, just 5 minutes quick offense. If he gets hot, he gets hot. But one guy I do want to shout out is Dante DiVincenzo. I feel like those 3 games that he was there on this trip, since Philly or whatever, the guys just looked like exactly what you need. Just another backup guard that can play make and step up in the starting lineup. I think with lineup of Jordan Poole, Draymond, and DiVincenzo, it just felt like the ball was moving a lot more. Dante just knows how to play. The guy just makes the right passes, shoots. He knows when to shoot, knows when to drive, create. So I feel like him being out too is just you lost another just stabilized ball handler, playmaker, and so you see Ty Jerome playing a lot more in these last 2 games. So I think getting Dante back is going to do wonders for this team, especially Jordan Poole. I feel like those two play really well off of each other in that second unit. So give Dante his props because he's really stepped up when the team needed him, even if they didn't win.
So
Yeah, just throwing some numbers behind what you're saying real quick. Those 4 games on the road trip before he went out, 13 points, 6.5 boards, 4 assists,
That's
steal and a
great.
half, hitting 48% from deep.
that's a
People
backup guard
Attempts,
right
no
there.
less.
People
You cannot
talking
ask
about
for
missing
more.
GP2. Like that's the kind of production that you want from a GP2 guy, kind of guy that you want to replace. And Dante was a cheaper option, so the guy's
Yeah,
doing
and
exactly what we need for
all
him.
due respect to GP2, but like
Yeah,
they had to spend so long finding ways to work him into the offense. GP2 is not capable of stretches where
yeah,
he's taking
he couldn't
seven
play
threes a
make like
game and
this.
making
Yeah,
almost half of them. Like
yeah,
he can't do that.
just
And that's
he couldn't
fine.
play.
But
Yeah, he brought this stuff to the table, but Dante also brings another just level to his offense that is needed right now, and especially with Wiggins out, I felt like he was great in that second unit playing next to Jordan and Draymond. So excited to see him come back. Hopefully he's back for that Christmas game, and Jermichael Green too, man. I mean, he hasn't been playing well for like the larger part of the year, but he had some good stretches, and again, just kind of giving you that you could play him as a backup 5 on any given night, and he might help out, he might not, but he had a couple good games in there as well.
He might grab a contested rebound here and there, like he has in the last
I
couple
hit a
days.
couple threes.
He stroked a 3 or 2 the last week. I'm gonna step out here and see what happens, but I've been enjoying Steve Nash Jr., Ty Jerome last week. As far as what you're getting from a 2-way player, I can see he's the best version of the Steve Kerr point guard we've had in the last 5 years. I think I put out a little
He's very
tweet the
fundamentally
other day.
sound.
I have him above Kakamaker. I have him above Quinn Cook. I've got him above Chioza. I've got him above.
I'll give
Who am I
Cheese some
missing there?
respect, man. Cheese was pretty nice.
No, I'm taking Ty Jerome every time, man.
we respect
Uh,
Cheese over here.
Like Cheese.
Speak for yourself, man. I'm big. Ty Jerome. He carries himself like he thinks he's Steve Nash, man. It makes me laugh every game, dude. This guy has more confidence than I think any of those Steve Kerr guards they've had so far. But just getting from your 4th guard, basically 5th guard in Ty Jerome, getting some solid minutes here and there where, jokes aside, he's not going to do anything exceptional, but he makes some really good passes and he kind of switches the floor pretty easily too. And I really like, he knows what he's doing out there. I think he might land himself on an actual roster in the next year or so because he's a backup guard in the NBA, I think. and to have him where they have him has actually been really helpful. He's gotten his guys organized and he's finding his teammates, which, you know, they don't want anything else from a guy in that position. So shout out to Ty Jerome. Before we move on to finger pointing, go ahead, Chuck.
He's got just keeping up with our hot stat guys. 10, 3 and 5, shooting 52, 63, 86 over the last
Dog.
Yeah,
I mean, look, he looks good, man. Like he's doing exactly what you need from him right now with so many guys out. Like seeing a couple shots, he's making the right play. Good for him, especially as a two-way guy. Like he's showing what it's teams that, you know, he could be a very serviceable NBA point guard. So good for Ty. But Matt, you want to get some finger pointing going?
We always can. I'm always up for some finger pointing. Listen,
I love that.
What you guys are watching this season potentially, again, in my mind, crumble. In your mind, something better is happening, and I appreciate that. That's why I'm glad I have you two in my life. But what's going on? Is it just health right now? Obviously, we were talking earlier. They're not going to win games when 3 or 4 of their best 7 guys are out. But this team was 500 before Steph went out. They are obviously struggling in a way that does not suggest a title is on the way right now. But again, there are some things to be said. So what do you guys think? Is it just bad health? Did the front office fail this offseason? In my mind, that's where I look first and foremost. I think the front office has not been at their best. I think Bob deserves some heckling here and there from Dub Nation. What do you guys think?
Can I give the most boring answer ever that no one would ever accept in a rational Twitter discussion that we see all the time? It's probably a little bit of everything. Shockingly, it's not just Bob Myers' fault. It's not just Steve Kerr's fault. It's not the center who plays 12 minutes a night. Everyone's got a part in this. Like, with all due respect, literally everyone not named Steph Curry has played a role in this to some degree. And Andrew Wiggins.
Steph is getting hurt. It's all on
him.
Yeah,
no, that's right. He shouldn't have he shouldn't have tried to dig that ball out. Also, Kevon Looney is infallible. I'm sorry I implied that he would ever do anything wrong. No, but I think if you really want to get into it and you want to like rank who's started this situation, you have to look at the front office and management. And I kind of loop that together because it seems like there are definitely some things that they are not on the same page on. And instead of working that out
say the things, Chuck. Say the things.
The 7-foot thing.
I mean, we all know, like, you know, what's the point? Like they disagreed on the Wiseman pick. The Wiseman pick hurts them now. And, you know, it is what it is. But Wiseman's almost the perfect example because he was put in a position that I don't think is good for him. Like, he's not a system fit. They don't have the infrastructure necessary to help him succeed. They don't have the patience necessary to help him succeed. It doesn't help that they have a nasty, rabid fan base who wants to just shit on the kid around every corner. But they've also had a bunch of bad luck. Like, the guy's just missed a bunch of time with injury. Like, he's never been able to get on this team the right way. Like, it's so cruel that the only time they actually had a team in the last 3 years capable of somewhat supporting him, he missed the entire season. And then by the time he comes back, they're like, sorry, kid, there's 10 games left. Like, we can't really just drop you in here. We gotta worry about the rest of the season. So I think that really sort of sums up how these things have gone for the Warriors, because yes, they've made bad decisions to put themselves in a rough position. Like, there's no denying that has happened, but there's been some bad luck. There's been some things kind of out of their control. There's been issues with, you know, like the personnel that are on the court, with coaching staff and front office kind of fighting over things, you know. Like, I think we've seen pretty clearly that, you know, Steve Kerr is not afraid to use his rotations to send a message to the front office and be like, these are the guys I have to work with right now. We just got our ass kicked by 30. What are you going to do about it? And it sucks that that's kind of how these issues have to get resolved, is in this very drawn out way, because they've made mistakes, but, you know, at the same time, like, they've just had bad luck. Like, you know, what are you going to do because Klay Thompson comes back and he's not fully himself and things have changed? Like, what are you going to do to stop Draymond Green from punching Jordan Poole in the face? Like, what? there's so many things here that are just happening all the time. Like the underrated thing we don't talk about. Like so many teams coming off championships disappoint the next year because they're tired. This is an especially old team that won that title. Now they're trying to bring all these young guys into it. Like, yeah, things are going to go wrong. So that's kind of my lame, boring argument is pretty much everyone deserves a little bit of blame and probably some more than others, but you can't just make it black and white. There's no one thing you can point at and say, if we don't do this, everything is okay. Or if this doesn't happen, everything is okay. Because like there are so many dumb arguments I see. Like the people who say, oh, you can't build a championship roster with James Wiseman on it. What happened last year? Like, did that just not happen? I mean, there's so many things that are out of your control. And yes, on paper, it doesn't make any sense that that team basically just, lit $10 million on fire for reasons out of their control last year and still won a championship. But like, to say it can't happen is stupid when it literally just happened. So people just need to like keep their minds open to the possibilities with this team. And yeah, things are pretty dire right now, but don't go looking for some quick, easy fix because you're not going to find it.
And that's kind of where I'm at. Like you can ask like, who to blame. It is what it is. Like there's no one right answer. I kind of agree with you, Chuck. I feel like at this point it's like who is it on to fix this? And like that's where you can really, point a finger at. And I'm with you, man. I think it starts with the front office and management. They came in Joe Lacob for everything that he's done for this team, 4 championships, rebuilt them into the guy who owns the team that just became the dynasty of this era, just won a championship last year. And James Wiseman is his like brainchild. That was his pick. I get it. Like, but you gotta at some point. I feel like it's on Lacob to see that you whiffed. But like, what's the goal for your team? Is it for you to be right on this pick and like this guy's gonna become the next David Robinson, or is it to win fucking championships? And I think that's where it starts with Lacob and it goes down. Like so, then you got to get in there. But I think for this team, they're at crossroads of this 2 timelines plan, and you really got to at least adjust it. If you're not, I'm not asking you to get off it. I think Kuminga's got a lot of talent. Moody's showing some stuff. Wiseman also, to his credit, has shown that he's developed a little bit. So I'm not saying teams aren't going to be asking you. You got a solid like just group of young players that teams are going to, say I can win with this guy in 3 years, whatever it is. But you're not doing the kid a service by keeping him on the team and having to get, like Chuck said, just dragged for every bad play that he has. But he's not going to help you win right now. So I feel like you have to, at the end of the day, you got the 2 timeline plan because of the first timeline, and you owe it to the first timeline for the 4 championships they've gotten you, turning you into a dynasty to give them a shot to keep winning this thing. You just take it as long as it goes on, because that's really how the $7 billion valuation came through. So for me, it's on the front office from here.
On the 2 timelines point too. So I want to take it a step further. Like the whole idea that they could just like rebuild what they had from before.
Yeah, like you can't, bro. Like you had one of the 10 greatest players of all time, plus arguably the second greatest shooter and one of the greatest second-round draft picks of all time. That was your young core. Like that's not the same as Jordan Poole, Wiseman, and that's no disrespect to these guys. You're talking about all-time greats. These are Hall of Fame players who had that luxury to develop, and they became champions. You can't just plug them into a system and mold them in. Like they got to go through their bumps and bruises, and I feel like you're not doing either side of justice. So give your main guys a chance to ride this thing out, and build a team around that, because you can still. This season is very much salvageable. Like you're nowhere near like, oh, we got to blow it up. And because if you want to play the young guys, you're going to get games like last night where you lose them by 40. And that's what you get with a young team that's trying to develop. You see the Houston Rockets, you see Detroit Pistons. They're going through these pains, and they're lottery teams for it. So you can't have it both ways. And you got to pick one. And just keep in mind you got Steph Curry on your team, and he's in his prime.
So on that too, like when you talk about like the 2 timelines not working, I understand why they tried to take the shot for it and say like, hey,
I totally get it.
Yeah, like we have the picks to replenish the cupboard, and we can try.
And you had the time. They were your main guys were out. Like you had the time.
It made sense.
It just didn't work.
So I want to take it a step further than you, because I feel like the conversation, it's just like, oh my God, it just is so frustrating how everyone, like every night we have the same conversation about the two timelines. Like,
Mhm.
and in my opinion, it failed. Like,
Yeah,
that's
it's 1000%
fine. It's fine to just say it didn't work and move on. Like the
Pivot.
amount of bandwidth that people have spent just over and over beating to death, like, oh, these guys aren't ready, these guys aren't good enough, they haven't done enough drafting.
And to the front office's credit, like this is the first year we really got to see what it looked like, and this is year 3 of James Wiseman, of year 2 of Kaminga. So like, it's not like I get why they held on to it for so long, because this is the first year they could really see it like in how it looks. But you're on a clock, like I said, like the deadline to make a move is sooner, very very much sooner than later. So you really got to decide which way is going to win you championships more. Like,
yeah, so
I think there's a clear cut answer.
That's the thing more is like, what have they done? So with the two timelines, they went for this whole, let's shoot for the moon again. They still, it did not prevent them from winning another championship. Like, really, the only thing that has prevented them to this point is Steph Curry getting hurt, like Klay Thompson getting hurt. They were able to pick up the pieces otherwise. They haven't, like, besides Wiseman, who just, we all know was just not the right choice. All of these guys that they have drafted still have their value. They have also chosen the guy in Jordan Poole who they've said, we want him going forwards. Now, obviously, it's been a very rough season for him, but he's insanely talented. They've also managed to pick up Jonathan Kuminga, who looks like he's going to be a very good role player, if not like a starter level player by the end of his rookie scale contract. And everyone else in that team has still maintained their value. So, like, you can turn around and say, okay, we took Moses Moody, we kept him for like a year and a half. It didn't quite work out. We dealt him for a more experienced veteran. What's so wrong with that? Like, that's okay.
What every smart
like,
business
that's
would do.
not a big deal. Like, if you take Poole and like you take him with what, the 28th pick, and you turn him into the player he is now, and then you want to keep it going, like, that's great process. Like, you take Kuminga, you want to keep him around, that's great. And all the other guys who don't work out, you still have value out of them, so you can trade them and you can get more. Like, the degree to which people have said that this is a failure is so ridiculous to me. Like, I do think it is a failure because they failed to get like really any sort of rotation guys.
It's how you adjust. How do you bounce back from where you're at right now? And it's very salvageable.
Yeah, like, but they haven't like put themselves in a position where they can't adjust. Like, that's what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.
If it was this complete failure, then they'd be stuck in like no man's land, being like, ah, shit, well, we got all these terrible contracts, we don't have any good players, all our guys are young. Like, there's so many worse spots to be in.
1000%.
And they could turn around tomorrow and deal like 3 of these prospects to Chicago and like ditch some salary, and suddenly it'd be like,
good players back.
Oh shit. Yeah.
It
only takes
two
one team to
timelines
value
failed.
them.
One timeline is still very much intact, and
very much.
That's it. The 2 timelines is done. There's no 2 timeline plan. None of these guys. People need to realize. Everyone needs to realize. The front office, I'm sure, realizes it in most spots. None of these guys is going to go forward and take this team to contention once Steph Curry retires. It's not going to be any of these guys. There's no second timeline that once Steph is out, there's no second group coming in that they've drafted so far, at least, that is going to keep taking these guys titles.
They have the group, like they have Wiggins, Looney, and they're just like, how do we?
26, 27 years old. Cool, 23 years old. Kuminga, if you keep him, 20 years old. They don't need. It's crazy. And the funny thing, like they need to realize this far into the game that there were guys that could have drafted who could have done that, but the front office failed in that regard. They picked the wrong dude. That was the goal.
That's fine.
And that's their fault.
Okay.
That's their fault, and that's fine. They can still win titles now, right? And we know who those guys are. It's Halliburton, it's Wagner, it's probably still Kuminga, right? But they didn't do those guys. And this is the roster they have. And they can still turn the roster they have into a roster that competes for titles for the next 2 to 3 years, probably. And we see it. I have no doubt. This is the thing. It's we know Steve Kerr is not looking at this and not thinking more or less like, hey, James Wiseman is not the future, right? We know he knows that. We know Bob Myers knows more about basketball than all of us, right? He knows James Wiseman is not the future. They need to make the moves that indicate what we all know to be true, and that those moves are that there's no two timelines, right? The best we've kind of watched
Your
this,
future's
right?
now, man. Your future's
The
now. You
best
can
way to
walk out of here
build
with
into the
8
future,
championships.
yeah, the best way to build into the future is to demonstrate competence in the front office. Like looking at Memphis right now, looking at New Orleans, looking at even Brooklyn, right? Boston, all these teams that kind of built up and build equity with their fans, with their teams, with their rosters, and they've built themselves into these contenders long term. The Warriors need to keep the young guys they have aren't all of a sudden going to be contending pieces on their own. They need to grow into that, right? And if they're not going to make the moves, they're going to have zero timelines this year, right? If they're not going to make any moves this year, it's going to be no timelines because
and you
they're
really
not.
And that's the one inexcusable outcome of the season is if you waste a year of Steph Curry's prime when he's playing the way he has been. That's the one. Just I don't care. You can lose in the playoffs. You can make if you make a run and you lose, and you went in. All your kudos to whoever beat you. But if you end up with like in the play-in or like the outside looking in, like come on, man, like this is not LeBron and AD on the Lakers with an unhealthy year. Like this was a very salvageable season, whatever 30-something games in.
Yeah, it's they will build. They already in a lot of ways have, right, but they will build eternal equity with the fan base if they go all out for the last 4 years of Steph's career.
Yeah,
if they go all out to win titles, they will go. This fan base will not ever look back. If James Wiseman in 6 years turns into an all-star, looks unlikely, but if it happens, hey, if they win a title this year, next year, without him on the roster, no one's going to care. Okay.
100%.
What we do care about though is our friends at Anchor, and I need to take a solid 60 seconds or so to tell you about them. And we'll be back in just a moment, guys. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.